One of the most important things that we can do in entrepreneurship is try to understand who our customer is. Now, when we're early on in the venture, one of the things that we're commonly thinking is that we have the right product. We know that it solves a problem. We have all these beliefs about what happens. And if we get too far ahead, we stop really addressing some of those basic underlying assumptions that, if we're not careful, can have a pretty significant impact on the success of the venture. So that's where we get to customer discovery. Customer discovery is a very simple process that we use in entrepreneurship where we try to test some of the major assumptions that we have very early in the venture so we can see if we're on the right track and ultimately if we need to tweak anything about our particular product or service idea. Now, with customer discovery, what we're really trying to accomplish here is we're trying to address two really important things. One, we're trying to address if we have the right customer. We commonly have beliefs as to who we are creating products for. And so we want to make sure that we understand our customer. We know that they have said problem. We understand who they are. And so later on, we can, when we're setting up kind of our marketing campaigns and developing marketing strategies, we know exactly who we're going after. And that's going to help us identify what should those marketing campaigns look like and how should we market. Now, the other thing that becomes really important is we need to be able to address like the problem solution, which we commonly refer to as product market fit. Now, achieving product market fit is one of the most important things that we can do in entrepreneurship and will determine the success of a venture as to whether or not we achieve product market fit. Put very simply, all product market fit is that the solution that we've created addresses a real need for a group of consumers. When that happens, we have product market fit. Now, the only way to really determine 100% is if we have something that's commercially viable, it's available in the market for purchase, and people are actually purchasing it. But remember, at this stage of the venture, we haven't developed a product yet. And what we don't want to do is commit all of those resources into creating a product or service and then realize that all of it was unnecessary and that our customer doesn't have the problem that we think they do, or the solution we created doesn't quite address the problem the way they want it to. That's inherently wasteful and not only requires a lot of time, but there's a lot of money invested in that process. So what customer discovery is about is what if we could, at the beginning, address some of those things so we don't get to the very end of the process and realize that we, had the ladder hanging up against the wrong wall and we climbed it and it was great, but where we need to be is over somewhere else. So that's what customer discovery is really all about. Now, the customer discovery process fits within the larger process of what we call customer validation. And so what I'm going to do here is just show you quickly how this sort of fits in to the larger process. So we have customer discovery on the left-hand side, and then you have customer validation. Now, this is oftentimes referred to as sort of the kind of search aspect of entrepreneurship, where we're searching for a particular business model. We're searching for who our customer is and the product that's going to address their particular problems, trying to develop the feature set that would allow us to create the benefit to address said problem. We're really just trying to figure things out. Once we get out of this stage, we get into the execution, which is where we're launching and trying to run this business. But we spend a lot of time on the search phase, and oftentimes we never exit it because we're trying to make sure that we address those key areas before we start committing too many resources. So what ends up happening at customer discovery, and you'll see, is we end up asking a lot of questions. And we're going to talk about what these questions might look like, but it could be, we have questions about who our customer is. We're trying to figure out the problems that they have. We're trying to propose potential solutions to that and seeing how they react. And then through this process, we're getting more feedback, and we ultimately kind of retool and what we call reiterate over and over and over. And we kind of continue through this process of customer discovery and customer validation. Now, once we've addressed all those areas, then we can kind of move on, but that's really from a high level how the process works. So what I want to do now is kind of walk you through a few steps to customer discovery, just so you understand sort of the process that we would go through to try to address this. This is going to be unique to each person because obviously, the questions that you ask and the things that you actually investigate for that matter are going to be unique to your business. But what I want to try to do is give you kind of some general things to consider so that you can apply these to your specific business. So the first thing that we do in customer discovery is we have to establish what we call a hypothesis. One thing that's really surprising to people that are kind of unfamiliar with the process of launching a venture is that entrepreneurship takes a very scientific approach, much like you would in chemistry, where you develop sort of the parameters surrounding an experiment and you would identify a hypothesis and then try to test said hypothesis. We take the same approach in entrepreneurship. Now, one thing I want to mention here is it's important for your hypothesis to be really specific, right? If you say that I believe that my product solves a problem, that's a little open-ended. It doesn't really address specifically what you believe the problem is. So one template you can use is my idea addresses, and then here we're going to identify what the problem is. So whatever that is for you, by, and then here, your solution. And you want to be, again, as specific as possible here because that's what's going to allow us to get some very valuable feedback that is going to allow us to determine whether or not we're on the right track. The next thing that we want to do is we want to specify our assumptions. Regardless of what type of business idea that we're going to come up with, we're always going to have some assumptions. There are some things that we believe to be true that, if potentially not true, have some pretty significant could have a pretty significant impact on our business. And so much like before, right, we have assumptions related to our particular customer and their specific demographics. We have assumptions related to our proposed solution. We have assumptions related to how much our customer is willing to pay. And so there are all these types of things. And so what helpful is try to build a list of all the different assumptions. And what I would recommend doing is then with that list, then go ahead and rank them in order of most significant to of least significance in terms of, if they're not true, how that impacts your business, right? So if it's a pricing thing, then that might not be overly significant because you can make some adjustments and kind of hit a certain price point. But if it's, whether they have the specific problem or whether they value it entirely, then that has much more significance and obviously could be more detrimental to your business. Now, the third thing we're going to do is we're going to ask questions. And we don't just want to ask any questions, right? We want to ask the questions that are going to allow us to test this hypothesis that we already identified in step 1, and then allow us to test and answer with some clarity some of those assumptions that we addressed in number 2. And so one of the ways to kind of do this is to ask open-ended questions that lead you to get some information that can help you address one of those areas. And so this could be anything as specific as, what is your current way of solving said problem? Again, focusing on what your problem is, trying to get a better idea of what it is. In the early stages, we're so focused on trying to convince people that our product is worth it. We need to take a step back first and address whether or not our product is actually needed. And so the first thing we want to do is to try to see how customers currently solve this problem. Do they have an existing solution? If so, that might mean that they're satisfied with their options, or you might unveil that they're currently unhappy with their existing options. You might ask, how this method works for you as far as your particular solution and how they see that fitting within kind of their existing day. What do you like or dislike about this? What is the hardest part of solving X problem? Not all problems are created equal. And so what you might find is that there's a spectrum. If we were to look at this from a scale perspective, and then a 10 is, this is a severe or significant problem. And then obviously a 1 is pretty insignificant, probably not something that we really think about during the given day. Just because someone says, yes, this solves a problem, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have a particular opportunity here, because what if we're kind of down here? Are people really going to be willing to go out of their day to find a solution to a problem if it's not very significant? And so we want to find something of more significance. And so by asking good questions, good open-ended questions, and trying to get just information from our customers to learn, not to necessarily prove that our product has commercial viability, but just simply to learn, we can in turn try to get a better understanding and determine whether we're on the right track. And really, as entrepreneurs, our goal is to be problem solvers, right? We want to try to identify problems in the market and then develop creative solutions for that. And so by using customer discovery, while our initial assumptions might not be true, they could help us kind of uncover some other insights that might lead to new opportunities. Now, the last step to customer discovery is we're going to assess and refine. And that means that we're going to take into consideration all of that data. We're going to put it in Excel. We're going to develop some numerical values for some things. We're going to try to determine whether or not we are on said right track. And then we're going to go at the process again. And so this is an iterative process, which means we don't just go through it once and say, okay, I've done the customer discovery thing. I can go on now to the execution piece and building my business model and building my product and those sorts of things. Oftentimes this can take a number of different attempts, and each time we're getting a little bit more refined. And so if you think about it from, the analogy of like when you go to the doctor and you get your eyes checked, and they go through and they, give you, I have very bad eyesight. And so this is a very real example for me. And they tell you, okay, well, 1 or 2, and they're flipping, the lenses, and, obviously one's pretty clear and one's not. And oftentimes they're the same. And so they'll say, hey, is 1 or 2 clear? This is designed to give us clarity over who our customer is, clarity over the problem they have, clarity over the solution that they will accept. Not perfect, of course, and we're going to perform other projects, including like an MVP test and those sorts of things that get us more insight. But early on, doing customer discovery helps us to answer some of these areas with clarity so that we have the confidence to commit more resources and continue down this path of entrepreneurship.